1 minute ago. The unthinkable happened. In a moment that stunned every viewer and sent shockwaves across the nation, Keir Starmer was taken into custody live in a dramatic, unexpected twist that nobody saw coming. Phones dropped, newsrooms froze, and within seconds, Britain found itself thrown into a storm of panic, outrage and disbelief. A political earthquake unlike anything seen in decades. But what led to this explosive moment, and how did a seemingly ordinary broadcast suddenly turn into the most shocking political spectacle in modern British history? In this fictional dramatic scenario, everything begins quietly, almost too quietly. A simple press briefing, routine and predictable, the kind of broadcast most people would barely pay attention to. But behind the scenes, tension was already brewing. Rumours had been circulating for days. Whispers of an escalating investigation, hints that something was moving beneath the surface. No one expected anything concrete until it happened live in front of millions. As Starmer stepped up to the podium, the nation barely noticed the shift in his tone. He appeared collected, composed, but something felt off. As if the weight of a hidden storm pressed down on him. Analysts watching from their studios sensed it immediately. Social media, always hypersensitive to subtle cues, erupted within seconds. Why does he look nervous? What's happening? Is something wrong? No one knew. Not yet. Then the broadcast cut abruptly. The camera shook. A sudden commotion rose from the edges of the frame. Muffled voices, hurried footsteps, the unmistakable tension of something going terribly wrong. Viewers leaned closer, confused, trying to make sense of the chaos unfolding on their screens. And then came the moment that stopped the country cold. Several officials moved into frame surrounding Starmer with an urgency that made the entire situation explode into instant, overwhelming confusion. The room froze. Starmer himself looked stunned, as if blindsided by the very thing he had feared might happen but hoped would never unfold so publicly. The lead official stepped forward, speaking words that instantly ricocheted through every television, phone and tablet across Britain. The entire nation held its breath. Within seconds, clips of the scene flooded the internet. Live streamers started shouting over their broadcasts, commentators scrambled for information, and journalists rushed to confirm what they were witnessing in real time. The moment was shocking, not because it happened, but because it happened live with no warning, no preparation, no time for damage control. Across the UK, the reaction was electric. Some people cheered, convinced this was the inevitable climax of weeks of political suspicion. Others were horrified, outraged, demanding answers, calling it a national humiliation, claiming the country had crossed a line never meant to be crossed. The divide was instant, the uproar was immediate. Britain was officially in meltdown. Suddenly, scenes erupted in London, Manchester, Birmingham, Glasgow. Crowds gathering, arguing, chanting, shouting over each other with raw emotion. Commentators on every channel struggled to keep up as chaos engulfed the political landscape. What began as a quiet afternoon briefing transformed into a breaking point moment that forced people to ask one question again and again: how did this happen? And what does it mean for Britain now? Because in this dramatic scenario, the arrest wasn't just a legal shock. It was the spark that ignited a nationwide crisis. Institutions trembled, parties scrambled, allies distanced themselves, opponents seized the moment with a ruthlessness that only political upheaval can unleash. This was more than a headline. This was the beginning of a storm that threatened to pull the entire nation into uncharted territory. As the footage continued to circulate at lightning speed, Britain found itself spiralling deeper into confusion. Every outlet tried to claim they had the real reason behind the dramatic moment. But the truth was that no one, not even senior political insiders, fully understood what they had just witnessed. The silence from official channels only intensified the madness. With no explanations, no statements, and no immediate clarification, the narrative began to fracture into 1,000 pieces, each one sparking fresh waves of speculation. News presenters, usually calm and composed, struggled to maintain control. Some looked visibly shaken as they replayed the live clip over and over again, slowing it frame by frame, searching for clues. "Look at his expression," one analyst murmured. "He didn't see this coming." Another pointed out the officials' movements, the tight formations, the urgency in their steps. Signs that whatever was happening wasn't routine. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It felt like the climax of something that had been building quietly beneath the surface for months. Meanwhile, outside government buildings, the atmosphere was turning explosive. Crowds surged against barriers, demanding answers. Some shouted angrily, convinced they had just witnessed the ultimate betrayal of public trust. Others defended the moment fiercely, insisting that dramatic action was overdue and necessary. The nation wasn't simply reacting, it was dividing, splitting open along political fault lines that had been silently cracking for years. Online, the situation grew even more chaotic. Every platform became a battlefield. Thousands of posts per second. Hashtags locking the entire internet into a single moment of collective shock. Commentators and influencers from every side jumped into the storm, amplifying emotions, escalating the drama. Some called it justice, others labelled it a coup. Some believed it was a distraction from something bigger. The theories became so tangled that even experts couldn't separate fact from panic. Inside Parliament, the mood was even worse. Senior officials rushed between rooms, phones pressed tightly to their ears, whispering furiously into microphones. MPs were seen leaving briefings with pale faces, refusing to answer questions, dodging cameras as though the truth itself was radioactive. Reporters swarmed every exit, desperate to capture even a hint of what was unfolding behind those heavily guarded doors. One journalist described the environment as a political version of an earthquake. We're all waiting for the aftershocks. Another claimed breathlessly that this was the biggest constitutional crisis in a generation. But again, no one had answers, no confirmation, no details. Just a nation on edge and a government under immense pressure. And the pressure was growing by the minute because people wanted to know who gave the order, why did it happen so publicly, and why was the government refusing to explain anything. As the uproar intensified, the opposition parties seized the moment with ruthless precision. Spokespersons appeared on every network within minutes, hammering the government, demanding immediate transparency, calling for emergency sessions, accusing leadership of hiding the truth from the public. Their message was simple: the nation deserved answers and the silence was unacceptable. Even allies who had stood firmly with the government for years appeared suddenly uneasy. Statements started leaking, cautious, diplomatic, vague. But each one hinted at a deeper instability inside the political system. Some senior figures even stepped away from scheduled appearances, avoiding interviews, refusing to be cornered into taking a position. That silence only fueled the firestorm further. Every minute that passed without clarification made the situation worse. Britain wasn't just confused, it was becoming volatile. People who normally never engage in politics were now glued to live stream, refreshing news pages endlessly, desperate for information. The uncertainty was suffocating. Something big was happening, something unprecedented, something that threatened to unravel the country's political order. And as tension reached its peak, a chilling question echoed across the nation. If the arrest was this public, what could possibly be happening behind closed doors? Because this wasn't an isolated moment. It was the spark of something much larger. Something that would change everything once Section 3 begins to unravel the truth. As the hours dragged on, the silence became unbearable. Britain was holding its breath, waiting for the first official statement that could finally break the uncertainty. But instead of answers, a deeper, more unsettling development emerged, one that sent the entire nation into a state of shock. Late in the afternoon, word began to leak from inside Whitehall. At first, it was just a whisper, a quietly forwarded message between reporters. Then it spread to political insiders. And soon, it exploded across every news network and social media platform with the force of a bombshell. According to anonymous officials, the dramatic incident was not random. And it wasn't the result of a sudden confrontation. It was part of a coordinated operation that had been unfolding for weeks, planned in total secrecy to prevent interference or sabotage. The revelation shocked the country. If this was planned, then who exactly knew? Who authorised it and why? The speculation became uncontrollable. Some believed it was tied to a classified investigation, something so sensitive that even senior government ministers had been kept in the dark. Others suggested it involved internal conflicts, rival factions within the political system, or a power struggle erupting at the worst possible moment. But the most frightening theory, the one that began gaining momentum with alarming speed, was that this was only step one, a first move in a much larger, much more dangerous chain of events. Even more chilling were the reports emerging from high-level sources describing extraordinary security measures being prepared behind closed doors. Meetings were being held late into the night. Advisors were being recalled from abroad. Emergency plans, often reserved for moments of national threat, were being quietly activated. Something was unfolding at the highest level, and the public was still being kept in the dark. As the rumours intensified, crowds outside government buildings grew into massive surges of unrest. London became a pressure cooker of emotion. Some people chanted for transparency, others demanded resignations. A few simply stood in stunned silence, trying to process the scale of what was unfolding. Police presence multiplied, barriers were reinforced, and helicopters hovered overhead as if preparing for a crisis no one dared to articulate. Inside newsrooms, chaos reached a new level. Anchors struggled to maintain composure as unverified claims poured in from every direction. Screens blinked constantly with breaking news alerts. Journalists exchanged frantic messages, desperately searching for credible sources who could confirm the growing speculation. One veteran political reporter admitted live on air, "I've covered politics for 30 years and I've never seen anything this unstable." Then, without warning, a new piece of information surfaced, one that pushed Britain from confusion into outright panic. According to insiders, a sealed document had been delivered to multiple government departments just minutes before the live incident took place. The contents of the document were unknown. What was known, however, was that its arrival triggered the rapid, coordinated movement of officials seen in the broadcast. This was the first concrete link between the mysterious operation and the dramatic moment the public had witnessed. In Parliament, the atmosphere deteriorated even further. Meetings turned hostile. Senior figures clashed behind closed doors. Some demanded immediate answers, while others warned that releasing information too soon could plunge the country into deeper turmoil. The tension was so severe that one MP privately described the building as a volcano waiting to erupt, and erupt it did. As midnight approached, news leaked that an emergency session was being considered, one that could redefine the entire political landscape. The idea alone sent shockwaves through the nation. What could be so serious that it required a late-night session? What information was so explosive that it couldn't wait until morning? Journalists waited outside Parliament, covering the cold night air with blankets while their cameras remained fixed on the doors, ready to capture any movement. Meanwhile, intelligence analysts, former officials and political strategists flooded late-night broadcasts with ominous warnings. Some said Britain was entering uncharted constitutional territory. Others suggested the crisis could trigger consequences that would ripple across the entire government. A few even hinted that the situation could escalate beyond politics entirely. But the question on everyone's mind, the one haunting millions, was the simplest one. What exactly was in that sealed document? Because whatever it contained had set off a chain of events powerful enough to shake Parliament, divide the country and push Britain into a full-scale political storm. And as the night deepened, one thing became clear: the real shock, the real truth, had not even been revealed yet. As the nation drifted into the early hours of the morning, the air grew heavier, thick with anticipation and fear. Britain wasn't sleeping. It couldn't. Every screen in every home, every device in every hand was locked on the same breaking story. People waited for the moment that would finally unravel the truth behind the chaos. But no one expected what would happen next. Shortly after 2 a.m, a sudden alert flashed across every major network. Reporters abruptly cut off mid-sentence. Anchors pressed fingers to their earpieces, eyes widening in disbelief. Something was happening. Something big. The cameras switched instantly to the steps outside Parliament, where a row of officials appeared under the dim, cold floodlights. Their faces were tense, their movements sharp, and at the centre of them all stood a spokesperson holding a thin stack of papers. The nation fell silent and the statement began. In this fictional scenario, the government finally broke its silence, confirming the existence of an investigation that had been quietly unfolding for months. A classified operation involving multiple agencies, high-level oversight and strict confidentiality. The spokesperson explained that the events witnessed earlier were not spontaneous, not accidental, and not triggered by a single moment. They were the culmination of a long, complex, intensely sensitive process. But even as the statement continued, it became clear something wasn't right. The spokesperson avoided specifics. Questions remained unanswered. The essential details, the ones the entire country was desperate to hear, were left vague, almost intentionally blurred. The announcement only deepened the confusion, feeding more questions than answers. Across Britain, frustration exploded. People who had stayed awake for hours expecting clarity now felt betrayed. The crisis hadn't been resolved. It had been intensified. Outside Parliament, the crowds erupted into furious chants, their voices echoing through the cold night. Commentators watching the speech live reacted with shock. Analysts slammed their notes onto desks. Social media ignited like wildfire, demanding the truth that still wasn't being told. Then came the moment that pushed the crisis to its peak. Just as journalists prepared to bombard officials with questions, another leak hit the media. This time from someone inside the emergency session. A single message spread like lightning. The sealed document, the one delivered moments before the live incident, allegedly contained evidence of internal conflicts at the highest levels of government. Not accusations of crime, not allegations of corruption, something even more destabilising. It suggested a breakdown of trust inside the very institutions meant to protect the country's stability. The leak claimed the document contained warnings that certain actions were being taken without consensus, without oversight, and without the knowledge of key leadership figures. It hinted at fractures, divisions, and decisions made in secrecy, and for the first time since the crisis began, the public began to understand that the dramatic arrest seen live wasn't just part of a simple investigation, it was part of a political system under extreme internal pressure. Within minutes, the streets erupted again. Some people insisted that the document proved the system was failing. Others argued it showed the system was doing exactly what it had to. Confusion became anger, anger became fear, and fear became something far more dangerous: uncertainty on a national scale. Back inside Parliament, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Heated arguments broke out during the emergency session. Members clashed over the leak, over the secrecy, over the failure to communicate with the public. Voices rose, tempers flared. Even through closed doors, reporters could hear the intensity. And as tensions reached their breaking point, a final chilling revelation emerged. According to additional insiders, the events of the day were only the beginning. More information was expected to surface. More documents were expected to be examined. More actions, possibly even more dramatic than what had already unfolded, were reportedly under consideration. The crisis was not ending. It was only accelerating. By sunrise, Britain was a different country. The streets were filled with restless crowds. Parliament was on edge, and the entire political landscape was trembling beneath the weight of uncertainty. Families sat in their living rooms, replaying the footage again and again. Commentators spoke in hushed tones. Everything felt fragile, unpredictable, volatile. And in this fictional scenario, one message became clear. The arrest that shocked the nation was not the conclusion. It was the opening chapter of a political storm that Britain had never seen before. A storm that would continue to grow, a storm that would challenge every institution, a storm that would leave the nation asking the same haunting question: if this is how the crisis begins, how far will it go before it finally ends?